Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Kate Toye. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Oh, thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks. Well, first off, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I can't believe the eldest is 17. My girl Wickham will be turning 15 in August, and then I have my youngest just turned 12. I love to give them a shout out first because I find they're my greatest teachers, and they're also who inspire me to continue doing my own work. And what I do offer to the world is I'm a self-compassion coach. So I work with people who really who want to strengthen that relationship with themselves, but also and also how that ripples out to all the people in their lives, the important relationships that they have.
Yeah, I really love that term, self-compassion coach. It's the first time I've ever heard that, so I love that idea a lot. I also like the idea of your children being your greatest teachers, because I feel that so much. My 10-year-old, not only does he keep me laughing hysterically most of the time, anytime he opens his mouth, but it's like he's so awesome. I don't have another word for him. But they do teach us.
They teach us so much, and I find that the more we can be compassionate with ourselves, and which allows us to be more vulnerable, the more we are able to see what kind of teachings they can really give us. I'd love to share maybe I think it's been a couple of years now, but I remember standing in like my foyer hanging my coat, and I don't know what was going through my head, but I remember asking myself, Kate, do you really love your kids unconditionally? And of course I would say, I love my kids unconditionally. Are you joking? I would do anything for my kids. And then I got really curious about that and thought, is it easier to love them when they're easy? Is it easier to love them when they're do what I ask? Is it easier to love them when they're non-confrontational? Is it easier to love them when I don't feel like, I call it the minefield, right? You don't know where it is, but they say something in it, like something goes off inside your body. I got really curious about that. Oh, it almost makes me cry. And it was like, actually, I do love my kids when they're easy. And is that unconditional love? And then that brought me through the spiral of, if I love my kids conditionally when they're easier, do I love myself conditionally when I'm easier? So I just got really curious about it, and really sat with what makes, like, I'm doing quotations, but what makes a kid easy. And so then I got really interested in this like what I see now is just this minefield, and it's where we have our emotional triggers that we don't even know are there. But then our kids might ask us something, or express an opinion that's very different than their own, than our own, or they might be doing something that we maybe don't approve of, or we think that somebody is judging our parenting because of how our kids acting. And then we have this like emotional reaction, right? And we don't, what I found after watching and observing was that I would go into reaction mode instead of responsive mode. and I would be reacting from this little mine that went off, this landmine inside of me. And so how could I get to understand these minds and find them before my kids unintentionally found them? And how could I be more present as well? Because I find I would just not be present with my kids at that moment at all.
Yeah. So proactively looking for the triggers to de-trigger them before they go off. And we have to repair damage from the aftermath of the mine exploding.
Yes, which is why I absolutely love what you do and what you offer the world. Because I do feel that healing ourselves is the absolute best thing that we can do for our kids.
Yeah. I spilled coffee on myself one day in the car. And I got mad because I spilled coffee on myself. And then the next day, I think I spilled water on myself. And then the next day, you guessed it, I spilled on myself again. And each day got mad. And the third day, my son says, "Why do you get mad when you spill stuff on yourself?" And I was like, I don't know, because my dad got mad when he spilled stuff on himself. Like I didn't have any other answer. I didn't have any other understanding of why. And then he was probably 5 years old when he asked me that question. And then very recently, I spilled something on myself. I know you're shocked. And instead of getting mad, I went, because it was shocking. Like it just, the water was cold or something. And it was in that moment. And then he reacted, "What?" And I said, "Oh, I spilled something on myself." He goes, "Oh." It was like, it was just in that moment, I realized, oh, I shifted, like I changed. I hadn't paid attention to it. Well, 2 days ago, he asked me an even more random, from my perspective, question that was even harder for me to answer. He said, "When you're around my dad, what do you feel?"
Wow.
Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact words, but his dad and I have been divorced for 8 years. But for years, he and I never saw each other. There was a halfway, he's 8 hours away from me. So there was a halfway point that we would meet, and I would always meet his mom. And so more recently, I've been meeting him instead of his mom. And so I feel like in divorce situations, there's an awkward time period where, you see each other and it's awkward and it's weird, and then you get over it because it happens frequently. So the awkwardness just kind of dissipates. This is what I'm imagining. This is not my experience by any means, but so I was thinking about it, and I said, it's a little awkward. And, well, why is it awkward? And I said, I mean, I think because we were really mad at each other when we got divorced. And then a lot of time went by where we didn't see each other. And now we see each other, but it's still not very often. It's like once or twice a year that we see each other. And so it's like, it's a weird feeling that I just don't know what to do with it, or don't know how to explain, or, and it made me wonder, like, well, is it? Because like a lot of times I'll think that I'm feeding off of him and he's being weird. And so I'm being weird because he's being weird. And it's just, and so I was replaying this last interaction. I was like, okay, he wasn't being weird, but I think I was feeling weird. Is this just am I just repeating old behavior now that's just a habit, or like, I don't know. So it was just like, this is why he's my greatest teacher, because I never would have had this thought outside of that question.
And what beautiful awareness. And I'm curious if he feels something in his body when you two are around each other.
I think so. Yeah. Because we were kind of, this time around, we were kind of joking about how my son has been living in his swim trunks for the whole week he was at his dad's house. Because when I dropped him off, he had these swim trunks on. And when I picked him up, he had these swim trunks on. And I'm like, did you swim today? And his dad said, nope, he's had those on since yesterday. In fact, he hasn't taken them off since we went to the lake, which I think happened the day after they picked him up. I'm like, yeah, it's, if you don't tell him to change his clothes, he's going to stay in those clothes for indefinitely.
He's 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's summer and he's 10. It sounds like, why would you change?
Yeah.
The wisdom of kids is, and if we tune in and really listen to what they're asking, and sometimes what can happen is when our own emotional triggers, right, our mind field goes off, we might jump in with our own fears. And I mean, none of this is conscious at all. It's all subconscious, right? But what comes up is, it could be fear comes up, or anger, or sadness. And then instead of really attending to what our kid needs, we are so, we're just swept up in that feeling inside of ourselves. And then we go into, it could be reactive mode. It could be the fear comes out. It could show as anger. And our kids really give us these great gifts if we're open to it, of what, I just see emotional triggers as huge gifts now, of where we next get to get curious about where to heal.
Yeah. When I read a meme that said, when the wound is ready to heal, the trigger appears. That shifted the way that I looked at triggers. Because until then, triggers were really these really annoying things that get set off like minefields.
Right.
And that I can't control, that I'm under their power and I'm at their mercy. And that's not a very empowering place to be. But when I looked at the triggers as wounds that are ready to heal, now these triggers are my friends, and they're a gift. And it's just another like layer of the onion that I can peel off and get to whatever's at the center of the onion.
The beautiful reframe, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you really get curious about it, you'll find what's there is a really young core belief, right? A really young core belief, something, that probably happened when you were 2 or 3 or 4 years old. And this wound that just you were alone with as a kid, that you, my teacher Gabor, he says that when a child has to choose between authenticity or attachment wins every time. Right? So how these things they develop, like I was just writing out something today, and I was thinking about a child when you're sitting at the dinner table and you're a young kid, and sometimes you say things that you don't know what they mean, or you don't know, right? There could be something inappropriate behind it, or there could be, and you don't know, and you say it out loud, and you get sent away from the table. And you don't know what you did, and you don't know why you're getting sent away. And when you ask, if you're brave enough to even ask why, what did I do? Or you might get told something like, what you did, leave. Right? So what does a child learn? Well, I don't know what I did. I don't know if it's safe to say anything. I can't lean into these people, and these people have all the answers, so I must be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so these core beliefs, they start so young for ourselves that I can't trust what I say. So I just think of how many people I work with that, self-trust is one of the biggest things. Worthiness, self-love, and how to be self-compassionate with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I don't think any of us were, and also I really want to share, there's absolutely no judgment in what I'm saying. Everybody was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody. Right. And I mean, I don't know. I know that I'm pretty sure I was raised with, the stick to itiveness or tough it out, or, really not an understanding of what it would even look like to be self-compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And no judgment in that. Just, I don't think that was how people were raised. I just think of this thought where people are like, well, I'm toughening my kid because the world is tough, as opposed to, right, my place is a completely soft and safe space because the world is tough. And maybe if we weren't raising kids for a tough world, we wouldn't have a tough world.
Right. And I think that there's a difference between, coddling our children. A friend of mine and I were having a conversation about, her parents protected her from everything that that they could protect her from. And so when she was entered into the world, she got slapped in the face.
Right.
And there's a difference between that and what you just said, which is being the safe place and not raising them for the hard world. Like, there's a difference between those two things. And it might be a fine line, but there's a difference.
Yeah. And thank you so much for that clarity, because I do think that's how self-compassion gets viewed often, is that it is coddling, or I'm never going to get anything done because I'm just so busy being self-compassionate. I won't have any drive or motivation, or the stuff that won't get done, I'll be like, well, I'm being compassionate with myself, so I don't have to. That's really not what self-compassion is, right? Self-compassion is when things go wrong, and instead of our inner critic going off and us saying these horrible things to ourselves in such a judgmental, mean way, it's that shift of, oh, guess I'm a human. Oh, guess stuff happens. Oh, I guess that I learned something here. And I think for us to be able to be compassionate with ourselves as moms, and then when we raise our kids in a way that we're self-compassionate with ourselves, it's such a different example for our kids as they're heading out into this world where, I'm more like, I can't believe my boy is 17, but I say things to him. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just letting you know these are options that I didn't even know were options. And there's no push and pull inside myself that I have to. I really used to think I had to make the world safe for my kid. Like, I really used to think that, because I was like, I didn't want to bring people on the planet unless I could ensure that I'd make the world safe for them. I can't do that. But I can ensure that I give my kids all of the tools so that they can be safe in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Which is so much different than trying to bubble wrap the world for my kid.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of limiting beliefs that I created because I wasn't explained things. Like, things weren't explained to me. It was a lot of that, well, you knew what you did kind of thing. And so my boyfriend and I, we answer my son's questions, whatever they are. And I gave an example on a recent podcast that, we were watching a movie with him and his cousin. They're both 10. The next day they're going to camp, and my nephew had already seen the movie, and my son doesn't just sit and watch movies very well, unless he's 100% into it. And he wasn't 100% into this one. And I fall asleep pretty much anytime I stop moving for long enough to fall asleep. So the last like 15 minutes of the movie, I was sort of falling asleep. So I was getting into that, drowsy mode, and so the movie ended and we're packing up to go, and my son is singing a song or making a noise of some kind. And I'm on level 10 of overstimulation at this point. And so I said, okay, I need you to stop making that noise right now. And he said, okay, Mom, I'll stop, but can I ask you why you want me to stop making the noise? And I said, sure, it's because I'm really overstimulated right now and it's irritating me, and I would like to just, get up and go, as and he said, okay. And he's not afraid to ask why, and I'm not afraid to give him the answer. And I remember when I made a decision that this was important to me when my son was 6, and I was at a coaching thing, and the coach said that the best coaches are 3-year-olds, because they don't stop asking why. And I said, well, my 6-year-old still asks why to everything. And he said, good. That means you haven't shut him down yet.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that just slapped me across the face, like, the people that have been shut down because they asked why. Like, how many people have been told, stop asking why? And like,
could I offer something there?
Curiosity just starts with why. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, what was so beautiful was how, when you shared that, was that when you said back to your son why you needed him to stop singing, nowhere in there did you make it about him. Right? It was all I language. It was all this is what I need. I'm overstimulated. Right? There was no blame. And I think parents sometimes blame and shame, totally not consciously. Right? But I could just hear, I just could hear that differently in my head, where it would be like, oh my God, because you're so annoying. Right? Where we get tired and we say things that, aren't the most, like, it sounds to me you are very aware of holding your child's heart. And I just really want to, celebrate that for you guys. And my 17-year-old is still asking why. Like, he's passed me on how to find information, and he's passed me on research, and he comes up with all these great like arguments. And before, he would have some pretty far different perspectives. And I'm thinking when he was about 10, so 7 years ago, where he was really like quite different politically than where we are. And it could be triggering, right? But when I was able to get curious about what the real triggering was, it wasn't that he had a different opinion than me. It was that telltale story. Are you a good mom if your kid X, Y, and Z? Right. And what I found out after was this kid was just building his arguments for both sides. He was pushing me as far as he could, because I was one side and he was the other. So he was building his arguments on both sides so that he could come to his own conclusion. But I didn't, at the time, it was like, oh my goodness, what if people hear him talking like this out in the world? And what are they going to think of me as a parent? So now I understand what that really says is nothing to do with my parenting. What are they going to think of me? Right? If I'm owning my I language, what emotional trigger is going off inside of me right now? Right? Are you worthy? Are you any of the, are you lovable? Any of those limiting core beliefs that we, unknowingly came about when we were so young. And then our closest relationship, that with our kids, sets those off, unknowing to us that that's really not about the behavior of my kid right now. That's my own childhood wounds from when I was like 1, 2, or 3 years old. How do I unravel this so that I can hold my kid and be a present grown adult now? And then let's get curious about these triggers later on and figure out where I get to heal next.
Yeah. Because it's a journey, and it's a process, and we're, if we choose to, we're doing it until the day we die.
Right. I say, I love that, like, yoga is a practice, or my meditation practice, but I've adopted life's a practice, right? I'm just practicing. Let's see how it goes today. Like, right. And I used to be I realize now how much tension there was in my body when I had a lot of perfectionist traits before I really got deep into this healing journey. And I've been on the healing journey for decades, but really going in, I studied, and I am a compassionate inquiry practitioner, and really going in and holding those parts of our young self. I found has just been transformational for my understanding of how I operate in the world. But a lot of this, you don't even know they're there, right? Until they've exploded.
Right.
And so easy to think the other person.
It's easy to put it on the other person. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Or to think it's the other person, or I think of my part, like my kids has, like, my partner, we've been together for 20 something years, 26 years or something. And, I could have told myself an old story before where he's like, oh my God, he knows that annoys me. Why does he do that? As opposed to, what inside of you is getting annoyed? Let's get curious about that.
Yeah. I've been doing that a lot lately, that it's like, okay, this person has been put in my path to teach me something. So this one's not so painful. The next one's going to be even more painful. So let's heal this wound now. So I don't need, in our coaching community, we call them the packages get dropped. And, if we don't open this package, the next one's a bigger package, and it's got an anvil in it. And then the next, so like each of these packages are bigger, and they have more of an explosive power when you open them up. But the first package is small, and it's not, it's just a mild irritant, and we can deal with it then, or we can deal with it with a moderate irritant, or then a huge, it's like each time we don't pay attention to the irritant, the next one's going to get worse.
So true.
And I had, in my own self-compassion, self-love journey, I was looking through the events of my life and what were these events teaching me. And my ex-husband taught me, my son's dad taught me, that loving myself is my job. It's not anybody else's job. They get to if they want to, but it's my job to love me. And my first husband was trying to teach me that, and that went all the way back to my dad. My dad was trying to teach me that. I didn't learn it with my dad. I didn't learn it with all the boyfriends. I didn't learn it with the husbands. I needed that last one. That last one was very, very painful because I didn't learn it all on all the other opportunities, packages that had been dropped. I didn't know they were packages at the point, but it's like sometimes we don't pay attention until that last bomb explodes and the building comes crumbling down.
Yeah. And I just, if I could so bold as to offer, just when you spoke of your dad there, yes, of course we are the ones to love ourselves, but how different it is to lean into parents that hold us and love us completely as we are, right? That's a hard lesson to learn so young,
And
but 100%.
the truth is that all of us are wounded in one way, shape, or another. And then they hand us these humans that are itty bitty, and we're supposed to take care of them and not mess them up. We're just trying to not kill them for the first couple of years of their life. Meanwhile, we're, inflicting these wounds on them that we don't even know about.
And totally, and I think that's the keenest point, and also to be compassionate with yourself in that. As a mom, I think we can lean into, if I only knew, or if it had been different, or if I knew now what if I had known then what I know now. But research is accelerating at such a rate. There's so many healing modalities that have just come online in the last 5 years, let alone 20 years. Our parents weren't raised in the same kind of world that we were raised in. I mean, my goodness, Dr. Spock said, let your baby cry it out, because baby can self-soothe. Like, we know that's not true in any way, shape, or form now. We know that a baby cannot self-soothe, right? We know that a child stops crying in the crib because they realize no one's coming.
They've
right?
given
Given up. They've given up. So if you think I just think that reframe on what trauma is so critical, right? If you are left to cry in the crib at, a week old, you've already given up, that no one's coming for you. And of no fault, of whomever let you cry, because they probably were told by a professional, this is what you do, that baby's learning to self-soothe. Which, and I just, and also why I think our inner work and our healing is absolutely life-changing for our kids, is because then we can totally trust ourselves and trust our hearts. Because if you've ever heard a baby cry anywhere, as a woman, as a mom, that it's almost like I feel it like from my chest, where I have to like pull my body back, like I'm being led by my heart to, oh my God, get that baby and hold that baby. Because if you went all the way back to, the village, that's what would happen. Somebody would hold that baby.
Yeah, when there's when there's episodes of TV shows that have a baby crying on the show, I think I told my boyfriend the other day, I said that there should not be a crying baby on a show for any longer than 5 seconds. Like, that sound is so painful to hear. There's an episode of Friends where the baby's crying the entire episode, and I can't watch it. I cannot watch that episode, because it's supposed to be funny that this baby won't stop crying. Like, it's triggering, make it stop.
Right. And not only that must send some kind of message to that baby, for a baby to cry for half an hour. I totally hear you, because I was watching something else the other day, and I was just like, oh my goodness, what would make a baby cry like that? Like, right. And I guess what also comes back to, to give yourself compassion in that, as well as I totally feel humanity's changing, right? I think we're becoming so much more aware of so much more, but to also be compassionate with yourself around what were social norms once upon a time. What were, my goodness, I remember when people would just talk about mental health in my lifetime, like the stigma that came around it, or I'm not that broken. Right. Whereas, oh my goodness, are you joking? It's the absolute best thing you could possibly do for yourself, is to understand how you work and where you need to be held a little bit, and, what these cracks or triggers mean, and that they're absolute gifts here that you get to discover and hold and reparent yourself and love on those bits.
Yeah. I have a friend that has a very tumultuous relationship with her mom. And I remember saying to her one time that you are judging her for the information that you just learned. Didn't know back then. You're judging her for not knowing that information. When the internet is, 30 years old, I think, ish. I was in high school when I learned it existed. So, it's 25 years or so old. And the information that we have access to today is so different than what we even had access to 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago when your mom was raising you. And I didn't even know that Dr. Spock was the one that said the cry it out method, and what you said about they just give up. I didn't know that was even a thing until you just said it. I knew that there was the cry it out method, but I didn't know that the reason that they stop is because they give up.
Yeah.
And that just puts a whole new spin on what the trauma that all the generations after Dr. Spock grew up with.
Right.
Starting at infancy.
Right.
That just blows so much open into what we see now in the world.
Well, and I hope it also allows people to get really curious about themselves, right? Like, I think sometimes there's this belief that you have to suffer big T trauma to want to get curious about yourself and heal, right? Where being sent, like, to me, like timeouts, a kid's just learning that they're not accepted. And usually when a kid has a big behavior, they want to know that their environment is so safe and you got them no matter what, right? No matter what I do, you're going to love me. No matter, I'm testing it. I don't feel good inside. So I'm having a big reaction. I need to know as my big person, you got me. Yeah. But what was the old way to do it? Or some, and I'm not saying everybody was parented this way, but I'm just saying, like, social norm was time out. So yes, you may have gotten the behavior that you wanted, but at what cost? That kid says, I have to act a certain way, or else you're going to separate me from the love that I need. Right? When your kid has a giant behavior, they just want to know, I got you. I got you. I got you. I got you.
And before timeout was spanking. And there's a whole other can of worms that opened or that created. And
I really want to share my teacher. He really Gabor has really given me a reframe on that as well. He's like, what is spanking? He's like, why do we say spanking instead of eating? Right. I'm not quoting him, like, I don't want this to be that I'm quoting him, but really that was the reframe that he offered in something that I watched was, why do we, like, is it because spanking doesn't sound, it's acceptable? And really, I mean, you're kidding your kid because they're not acting the way you want them to act. So again, it goes back to authenticity over attachment, right? I have to act a certain way to stay attached. So how can you ever really trust yourself?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. No, I'm glad that you resaid that. I hadn't heard that either, that if there's attachment or acceptance, right? That you will always choose acceptance. That makes
no, you'll always choose attachment.
Attachment. Okay.
So you'll give up who you authentically are to stay attached.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm talking little, because, I know around, when you get into your teen years or stuff, you might start showing your authenticity and not, telling the story you don't care about attachment. But I mean, these beings come from our bodies, right? These people are our hearts, are of us. They search for our heartbeat, right? The first thing they knew was our heartbeat.
Hmm. And I had recently heard that when you're growing up, you don't see your parents as separate from you.
Yeah, I think it's till you're 2, right? I don't think until that happens until you're about 2.
But then but I think that it continues for a while where you don't think that there's something wrong with them.
Oh,
You think
yeah.
that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what's safer? What's safer, Alyssa? If I'm a little kid, would it not just explode my mind that there's something wrong with these big people who are my big people?
Who are the people that are taking care of me?
Who know the ways of the world?
They
Who
need to
run
be
this
perfect.
house?
Yeah.
How could it possibly be them? It has to be me.
Yeah. Bless our hearts.
Right. And then to also just maybe that gives a little shift too into, somebody raised your parents and
Yeah.
somebody raised your grandparents and somebody raised, your great grandparents. And again, without any judgment or should have done, could what, right? It just was what you knew.
Because none of us know what we're doing.
Right.
And we look to our experts like Dr. Spock to tell us what to do, what's right, what's the best thing. Because I believe that unless they're sociopathic, like that we want what's best for our children.
Of course. Of course. That's why we do anything, right?
And so even if you do something like let your children cry it out, because that's what you heard an expert say, and now you learned that that's actually harmful, it doesn't do you any good. This is where the self-compassion comes in. It doesn't do you any good to beat yourself up for listening to the expert and doing what he said to do, because you were doing the best that you could with the information you had at the time. And we just love to go back in time and with our new information and say, shame on you for not knowing that 20 years ago.
When no one else knew it.
When nobody knew. What?
Right. And also my mom, she shares that she wouldn't let her kids cry it out. She just couldn't, she couldn't physically, because it hurt her heart so much that she just couldn't. But then she had that, then there was the perception of babying the baby or, spoiling the baby, so even if you trust your heart, right. And there's still so much of so give yourself compassion, if I did it, if I didn't do it, there would have been judgment from others. I can only give myself compassion right now for the decisions that I'm making in this moment because I know better. And you know what? In 5 years, I might know something completely different than what I know right now. And I promise, my 5-year promise to past self is that I see you were doing the best that you could. Right. I think the best thing of the best practice for self-compassion is to think of somebody who you really care about, your good friend, a sister, your mom, somebody, your kid who you really care about. How would you talk to them if they were coming to you with this? Would you blame and shame them? Or would you just say, hey, come on, you're doing the very best you could. How could you know any different?
Because nobody's ever beat themselves up into happiness.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Right. And also I just want to share what you're doing. Our moms didn't have a space like this to talk openly, and what can ripple, who knows where this ripple's going to go, who's going to be able to hear this and see themselves in it and have a different way to look at things. Right. I have so much compassion for women,
Right.
Forever.
For women, period.
The history of women. Right. My God.
Yeah. And we're just, yeah, we've said it a bunch, but it's like, we're just doing the best that we can, every single one of us, because if we knew better, we would have done better.
That's right.
Unless you're a sociopath. Like, it's the reality. If you know better, you do better.
And I think another thing I know I'm guilty of it, forgetting. Like I can forget how tired I was, or how many other things I was doing at the same time, or how stretched thin I felt, or how, what? Oh, you were doing 8 zillion things and you dropped the ball there. But I'll focus on, in the past, I would focus on that ball that got dropped, as opposed to all the other balls that, as a mom, that you kept going. Right. So to give yourself a bit of compassion there as well.
Just saw a meme that I thought was so funny, that as a mom, you either have a clean kitchen, clean hair, or a clean kid. You don't have all three.
I love it.
I was like, all right, well, today it's the kitchen, not because I cleaned it.
I love it. There's this other one that I absolutely love that I've been sharing, I guess, because it's summer, but I just love it. It's like, when you were a kid and your mom ran back in the house before you like left for the road trip, and she seemed to take forever, and you're like, God, what is mom doing? And then now as a mom, I realize everything. She was doing everything. Before we were getting ready to go, everything.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I didn't help. I was not a helper. And when people tried to get me to help, I just whined until they gave up and did it themselves. And there's parts of me that still are like that's still like that. And recently, when my boyfriend's been packing the truck to go here, there, or somewhere else, and I'm sitting in the truck thinking, gosh, he's taking so long. Like, can we just go already? I'm like, well, he's not taking forever because he's going slow. He's taking forever because there's a lot to do and you haven't done anything. And I was like, okay, well, what's left to do? Okay, we got to get the dog packed, and we got to, make sure he's got his food and make sure we've got water. And and his gratitude for me doing the itty bittiest thing. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry that I wasn't more helpful the last 7 years.
Oh. And what just came to mind as you said that was like a tie back to how you said that you weren't helpful. When I went and got curious about was I loving my kids unconditionally, I really also was aware that I didn't want to raise my kids that they had to be helpful to be loved. Right. So that really came in there as well about and that would never have been intentional, but I just think of my eldest girl who can anticipate everything and is the first to jump up and do anything, right? And I really make a strong point of letting her know, you're valuable because you walk the planet, right? You're valuable because you're here now. You don't have to do these things to be of value, because I think sometimes women, we can get those kinds of mixed messages, like, get praised for maybe we were really good with little kids, or we were the doer, or what, I don't even have to think about it, she does it all. And then we kind of can get our self-worth twisted into those things. And so really to just, if that is something that you're going to do as a mom, get curious about, do I love my kids unconditionally? And then to just maybe get curious about that as well. Like, am I unintentionally, and again, curiosity with no judgment and total self-compassion, but am I maybe sending some kinds of mixed signals like that as well?
Yeah. We have a lot of unhealthy attachments of who we are, our self-worth, and what gives us self-worth. And on my last episode, I was talking about a person in my life that believes that she's not accepted. she doesn't feel like she belongs. And, I reminded her that she has just as much right to be on this planet as any of the rest of us. And she belongs just as much as any of the rest of us belong. Just because she's here. Not because she's done anything, not because she's 6 feet tall, not because, anything. Not nothing makes us worthy of being here.
Right.
Other than we're here.
Right. Yeah. Right. And she may get like to or be able to sit with that little her, her little her that got that message that she somehow didn't fit, and just see what that little her would like her to know.
Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
Oh, I would just say what I say, to all my clients: you are totally worth the work. And it is work. And you get to make life on your terms. Right? Like, I think that's something that we sometimes maybe you get to do that. And I also would love to share that you totally 100% get to understand yourself. And it doesn't mean that in any way it's any kind of judgment on those that raised you. You get to totally understand all of yourself. And that 100% for me anyways, it is the best thing that I could do for any love, especially my kids, and for any of my loved ones in my life, and maybe beyond my loved ones.
Yeah, because we can attribute a belief to a certain event without shaming or blaming or getting angry at the person that was involved in that event.
Yeah. And I would also share that you're also, your perspective matters. And it may have been a different way for somebody who was standing right beside you, and their perspective is valid for them as well. But it doesn't mean that you don't get to get curious about your perspective.
Yeah. Who said the unexamined life is not worth living? We're just doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over if we don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how do we not know, right? How do we, if we're not aware of what's going on, how do we know? It's like, and also I think just judging where you are, how far you've come along on the road, but really also the map has to tell you where you are, right? Because we could have a map that says where we want to go, but if we have no idea where we are, how do I get there, right? So really acknowledging where you are right now with total love and self-compassion, and also how far you've come. I think daily celebrations of how far you've come along that road are so beneficial. Or at the end of the night before you go to bed, 3 things that you did really great today that you love yourself for.
I like that tip, because that's, GPS doesn't work that way. Where you can tell you where you're going without knowing where you are. And,
right.
We often forget where we've been. And yeah, and it was Socrates. That said the unexamined life. Is there a book that's been really impactful along your personal development journey?
There's so many books. Right. But I would really love to share. Actually, right now I'm reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh.
And it is so beautiful. It is written by a botanist, and she's an Indigenous woman, I believe, from America. And she in this braiding of, how I see it in the braiding of the sweetgrass is her Western knowledge, her Indigenous knowledge, and really her heart knowledge. And she just shares about the bounty and the gifts of the earth and how much the earth provides for us. And then she also really talks about the beauty of raising her daughters and the lessons of the land that she wants to pass on to her daughters forever.
That's beautiful.
It's lovely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here with me today and pouring into our listeners and into me, and for a lovely conversation.
Wow. Thank you so much. And like I said, I love this gift that you're giving the planet. So beautiful.
I said this before I hit record, so I'll say it on the recording that I love these conversations and connecting with new people and that letting people eavesdrop on these conversations, because there's just golden nuggets inside each and every one of them, and it's amazing. And one of my guests said that she works with the parents so she can get to the little ones. Mm-hmm. And I like talking to the moms, because when you change a mom, you change the whole family.
You change the world when you change your mom, right? That's generational change.
Moms get so little credit, and we're so powerful, and we get no credit for our power.
And what else? And I don't know if you know this fact, but this just blows my mind, and I am so aware of it. When my mom was developing in my grandma's womb, her eggs were being developed in there. So I technically was inside my grandma. Right. So by empowering and, letting moms love on themselves and shifting that whatever inner critic, inner story moms might be telling themselves, right? Then when their daughters are pregnant, those eggs, right? Like that's 3 generations right there. Like that just blows my mind.
I'm also reading a book. I'm a surrogate for a mom here.
Congratulations.
I'm carrying twins, which was not part of my plan.
Oh my God, that's so exciting.
But I was reading a book called It Didn't Start With You.
Oh, I got that one too.
Is it on your desk? That's awesome. In that book, he recommends a book that's written for moms while they're pregnant. And it gives tips for raising your energy and calming you down and making you relax and bringing you up. And I'm like, every human needs this, not just pregnant mothers.
If I can share another, then I have to share Dan Siegel as well, Parenting from the Inside Out. Like, that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful.
That book is, Dr. Dan Siegel is I mention him almost every episode, that
I love that man.
My favorite. And here's why, because his parenting books are personal development books disguised as parenting books.
Brilliant.
So smart. Anyway, I know we could go on for another 2 hours, but we won't. So there will be another episode of Imperfect Momming for you all next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit alicialyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.